Romain Grosjean is off the leash now that he knows he's not staying with Haas in Formula 1 in 2021. As he said after qualifying for the Portuguese Grand Prix, "I don't need to tell you things that I don't think anymore." And he went on to reveal exactly what he thinks about a persistent technical problem that has been holding him and Haas back all season. And it's a fascinating one that explains some of the inconsistency of the capricious VF20. It's all about the rear suspension overheating and transforming the aerodynamic balance of a car that Grosjean says is the slowest on the 2020 Formula 1 grid. And it's hard to argue with him on that point, certainly when it comes to qualifying. Before we get into the details of Haas's unusual problem, please do subscribe to the Races channel for more on F1. I can promise you, we've got some great stuff to come. And so you know the moment we have a new release out, why not hit the notifications bell too? Back to Haas's problem. Usually when you hear about overheating troubles, it's about temperature causing components to fail, but that's not what Grosjean's talking about. Instead, it's about the rear suspension of the Haas changing as temperature builds. According to Grosjean, this can lead to an aerodynamic balance shift of as much as 4.4%. How big a change is that really? Well, in the words of former Jaguar and Jordan technical director Gary Anderson, who is the race's technical expert, it's a monster change that he likens to losing half of your front wing in terms of the impact it has. This means the aerodynamic centre of pressure, the point where the net of all the aeroforce meets, is moving around in an unpredictable way. Kevin Magnussen's having problems too, saying it changes the behaviour of the car in an unpredictable way, but it's a more serious problem for Grosjean. This is part of the reason why the Haas drivers are often far happier with the car in FP3 than in qualifying. During FP3 the rear end heats up and the setup is adjusted for the car in that condition. Grosjean does his qualifying simulation lap, then, in the 2-hour gap, the car cools down and the feel is completely different in Q1. As for why it's happening, the team has no idea. So what can we say about the problem? Well, with a little help from Gary Anderson, we can have a stab at where the problem might originate, despite the extreme complexity of suspension of modern Formula 1 cars. And remember, this is the 2020 specification Ferrari rear suspension that Haas uses as part of its technical partnership. Gary suggests that components overheating probably isn't the real problem, rather the fact it cools down after a session. This means that the ride height at the end of one session is very different to at the start of the next, hence the rake of the car is different, the platform isn't the same, and the aero balance is shot. If it was simply the dampers getting too hot, then some cooling ducts would probably improve the situation, but Gary suspects it's more to do with the hydraulic actuators they use to transfer the movement from the suspension actuators to the springing medium. These will be housed somewhere in the engine to gearbox bell housing, which is a very hot location. The actual springing medium could be in the side pod somewhere, or they could even have an air spring supporting the car. The compact nature of F1 component design could play a part here. It means the temperature change has a bigger effect on the volume of the system, creating a change on the rear ride height. Given it has supplied the suspension, perhaps this is also one of Ferrari's problems. It has already reported that the rear of the car is its biggest focus for the rest of 2020 and into next year. So maybe Grosjean hasn't just revealed something about the Haas, but also the Ferrari. It certainly has a problem with rear end instability, although Ferrari does appear to be more on top of any such problem. But whatever the reason, Haas seems to be stuck with it, as the latest attempt to ameliorate the problem in Portugal did not seem to work. In fact, according to Grosjean, it was the worst it has been all year. And with the Haas not having been updated all year, and the cars not changing dramatically next season, perhaps it's some consolation for Grosjean and Magnussen that they don't have to drive it in 2021. Let us know your theories on the cause of the problem, and if you have a little more sympathy for the struggling Haas team as a result, in the comments below. And give us a like if you enjoyed hearing all about Grosjean's revelation.